I normally start all of my talks by saying, hey, thank you so much for joining us here today. But today I want to do something different because, I'm Gujarat mein chu. I don't know Gujarati, I just use Google Translate for this. And so with that, came to sabse pehle, came to Ahmedabad, maja ma cho. I hope you're doing great. Come on, man, tell me, how are you folks? Thank you. And I'm not sure, I know most of I just hope that everyone can understand Gujarati. I won't use it a lot, but in case you can't, man, just give me some leeway. That's fine. But yeah, तो सबसे पहले आज हम बात करेंगे वेब एनिमेशंस के बारे में, कैसे ये सब शुरुआत हुई, उनका भविष्य, वर्तमान और what's the Hindi word for past? काल. Yes. Yeah. So as I was saying, आज हम बात करेंगे वेब एनिमेशंस के बारे में, उनके इतिहास, वर्तमान और भविष्य. And this is as much Hindi as I can say. Usually I just give talks in English. And so let's start with it. But before that, I think, okay, first of all, the clock is running. I'll just try to ignore it. Yeah, I think this is the part where I'm supposed to introduce myself. And I know I look way different in that image over there. That was clicked, one of my good friends clicked it using a DSLR. This is how I really look in life. This was in Mumbai. But apart from that, I'm currently working as an intern at HackRank. I'm a final year undergraduate. And yeah, please allow. Thank you. And I've been working with the web for over 8 years now at this point. And a fun fact about me, I started learning programming back in 7th grade because I had a crush on one of my classmates. And, she had this boyfriend, this guy, this funky guy, and I couldn't fight with him. So I was like, I used to be a topper back then. I was like, dude, I need to take my revenge because that felt like heartbreak, right? That she already had a boyfriend. So I was like, I need to hack his Facebook account. And that's what I did. I'm not saying I hacked his, but that's what I tried to do. And I just went back home and I literally Googled how to hack a Facebook account. First few pages were all those spammy websites, and on page number 3, there was this one book, this PDF, Ethical Hacking by Ankit Fadia. And I was reading through it, and it was mentioned over there, prerequisites to become an ethical hacker should be good at least one of the programming languages. So that's how it all started. And I hope, can you please cut this part in the recording because I don't want my relatives to find out. But yeah, so before every single talk, right, I always try to perform some activity, not perform, I always try to ensure that you can perform some activity, so get some oxygen into your brains. So how many of you have heard this particular anthem, this song by Bohemian Rhapsody, We Will Rock You? Raise your hands. Have you heard the song or not? Perfect. So we'll try to recreate that. And what we'll do is, whenever you see this image, so I know all of you are sitting, so we can't really actually, stand up and do a party and everything. So you can just sit and just tap your feet as hard as you can, destroy this floor. It's JW married, don't worry. And then again, when you see this again, just stomp harder. And then clap. That's it. So stomp, stomp, clap. Cool. Here's how it will look. Yeah. So you got it? This is what we'll be doing. Not right now, after this. So let's start. Stomp, stomp. And can someone record an Instagram reel? Come on. Stop. Come on, let's sing. Blood on your face, you pick this fist. Everyone, we will rock you. We will rock you. Thank you for engaging with that. I hope we got some oxygen in all of our brains. And with that, we can finally start with the actual thing. But again, before we do that, before we talk about web animations, let's first try to answer, why something like micro interactions or web animations is even important. So just like all of you, I just did a simple Google search, and this is what came up. I'm literally reading from the first search result itself. Micro interactions are events which have one single task, one main task and a single purpose. And they're found all across your websites and within your apps. Now, how do you define this single purpose? So when I was searching for that, I came across this one blog post by Vamsi, and this is how he puts it. Micro interactions, their purpose is to delight the user, to create a moment that is engaging enough welcoming, and dare we say it, the most important aspect, human. And of course, there's this new cool thing, ChatGPT, which is like an OpenAI, which is from OpenAI. It's a language model, and I just wanted to try it out. So I asked ChatGPT as well, why is something like micro interactions or animations even important? And this is how he replied. I shouldn't categorize it as a he. This is what ChatGPT replied. The main keywords were improve the user experience, make the website more engaging, interactive, and intuitive to use. Now, I'm not sure how many of you remember this particular seeing this particular dialogue back in those days. Someone from Dhananjay sir's era might still remember this. But back then, we didn't have all those optical cables and everything. And specifically in India, घर पे एक phone पड़ा होता था telephone landline के साथ, which you have to use, and sometimes it will go down, ADSL and all that stuff. But this is how internet looked back then, and believe it or not, early on browsers weren't really designed for animations rather than scrolling. They were designed to be mere document viewers, like looking at PDFs and all that stuff. And the first sort of animation that we actually got was in the form of GIFs. This was introduced back in 1987. Right now, we just use it for sharing memes and everything. But back then, mostly these companies used it for animating their logos. Or if you have seen those text screensavers on Windows 7, those were the sort of GIFs that we had back then, not the cool stuff that we have right now. But back when browsers were still at war, there weren't a lot of cross-platform standards to point to. The web was young and rife, and everyone wanted to be able to, build some cool stuff. And that's when Flash came into the picture back in 1996. Then I'm not sure how many of you still remember this website miniclip.com. When I was a kid, I'm from 2001, I'm 21 years old. When I was a kid, I used to play a lot of Flash-based games over here on this website. Sadly, I don't think it works anymore. I haven't even visited it. But that is what Flash allowed you to do. However, while Flash was a great technology, it went against one core fundamental principle of web, which was to be open and accessible. It was by Macromedia, and then later on, Adobe purchased it. But all in all, since 2020, Flash support has been deprecated across all major browsers, and Adobe did put a patch to it. So rest in peace. The first sort of actual language, that we had for something like animations was called SMIL, or Synchronized Multimedia Integration Language. I know it sounds a mouthful. And this was majorly used to animate SVGs and all that stuff. Now, for the next couple of years, this timeline seemed pretty stagnant. There weren't a lot of innovations. Until 2009. This was around iPhone 4 launch event. iPhone 4 was launched in 2010. And, there was a twinkling in Steve Jobs' eye. They couldn't fit in Flash and everything else in the Safari iOS browser. So the team who was working on Safari's iOS, or iOS Safari browser, they were like, dude, we need to make the web look cool. So how do we do that? Like, websites should perform and behave like applications itself is the ideology that they had. So they worked on some rules, some set of instructions, and they call it CSS animations and transitions. But again, Apple being Apple, there was no standards process. They just threw it out in the world, in the open, that, hey, here's something that we came up with. Go ahead and build something if you want. But on the other side of things, the good old Internet Explorer, teams in the folks in that team were going crazy because now they had to support 3 different standards: SMIL, CSS animations, and transitions. So how do you do that? How do you cope up with that, right? So after a few years, they came up with something called Web Animations API, which brought everything under one single umbrella. So Web Animation API, back then it comprised of SMIL, CSS animations, and transitions. And remember when I told you, since there was no standards process for CSS animations and transitions, there weren't a lot of similarities between SMIL and CSS animations and transitions. Now, Web Animations API consists of 2 key things, which is timing and animation, which is basically when and what. For example, assume that you have this image of a boat, and you want to add a fade-in animation. So you'll define the state something like this, that, hey, at 0 seconds, the opacity or the transparency can be 20%. And at 8 seconds, this is a very long fade-in animation, but at 8 seconds, the opacity or transparency can be 100%. Now, we are just defining the start and end states, and your browsers are smart enough to calculate every single state in between. So the first frame and the last frame that we define, these are known as keyframes. Now, I can't wait I'm going to be more excited to jump into the editor and show you some cool stuff that I've built. So I hope you can see my code pen screen. Can you read the code? Is the font size okay? Should I increase it? Yeah, I hope this works. But so this is a simple cat animation. This is a simple cat that I drew up in CSS. You can go through the code. It's not some fancy stuff, just HTML and some CSS. Now, what I want to do is, what I want to achieve, I want to see how we can make this cat's eyes blink. How we can make this cat blinks his eyes. So what I'll do is, I'll first define the animation. So you can see how I'll do it is that we have this eyelid class name, and this cat has two eyelids, just like all of us. One is left eyelid and one is right eyelid. So I'll define an animation using keyframes, and I'll call it blink, let's say. Now I'll define the states. Let's say at 0%, the height should be 0%. And at 50%, the height can be 100%, basically the height of the eyelid. And at 100%, it should go back to 0%. That's a blink. So now we have defined this, but our cat is still not blinking. So for that is because we haven't actually even hooked up this particular animation. So for that, we can use the CSS property animation and just type the animation name. Then you define the duration, let's say 2 seconds or 2000 milliseconds. And then you can also, there's also something called iteration. So if you don't put this infinite, it will just do once, but it's animation iteration count. And right now it's doing infinitely. Yeah, so our cat is blinking. Now going back to the presentation, 1 second. This is a transcript of what we wrote. Basically everything that we wrote, right? That was in CSS block only. So that's why these are all CSS animations. But if you notice one thing closely, over there as well, you always had a start and an end state. You were defining that we had this particular height at 0%, this one at 50%, and this one at 100%. But for this reason, these are also known as state animations. But what if we want to make our cat interactive? In real life, in human world, when you see a cat and you purr it, that's only when it blinks. So how do we do something like that? Let's say whenever I click on a cat, only then it should blink his eyes. So do you have any answers? Do you have any thoughts on this? Yeah? Great. So your answer is JavaScript, right? And that's the first thing that comes to your mind because when I said click, the first thing that comes to your mind is the first hint is click events. So event listeners, JavaScript. But the animation that we wrote, that was in CSS, right? So how can we do that? Can we do CSS plus JavaScript animations? That's exactly what the Web Animations API is all about. Now let's see some more code. 1 second. Okay, slide was weird. So how can we do that? I'm going back to the same example. Now I have removed the animation and everything. And instead of writing anything in CSS, now I'll try to write these things in JavaScript. I've just defined two variables for me to make it easy for me. A document.querySelector and querySelector all. I'm just getting the face and the eyelids. So first of all, what I'll do is I'll define the keyframes like what I did before. For this, I'll use an array. And in this array, I'll define that height should be 0%. Oh, sorry, this needs to be a string because percentage cannot be calculated. And then height should be 100%, and then back to 0% again. So I've defined the keyframes. Now what we can do is this eyelids variable, this one in particular, will return me an array. So I'll just use the first one just to go through this, and then I'll use the animate API, this animate method, and I'll pass these keyframes. The next thing that it accepts is the options. So in these options, I can pass duration or iteration count or anything. For now, I'll just write duration 2000, which is 2000 milliseconds. So if everything goes well, our cat should do something. Oh, okay. Yeah, there was a typo. Animate. Did it work? Let's see. Yeah, so our cat is winking at us, which feels weird for some reason. I don't know why. So what we'll do is, an easy way is that we can just iterate through this eyelids array. Eyelids dot for each eyelid, and then this accepts a callback. Eyelids dot for each eyelid dot animate keyframes, and then duration. And since we also want to add a click event, what we can do is we can just wrap this up and do face.add event listener, click, and then it accepts a callback. So in this callback, we can pass this particular function. So now, the moment I click on cat, it should blink his eyes. So that's what we achieved. Now, going back to the presentation again, this is the transcript of what we just wrote, right? If we notice one thing closely, what we are basically doing is, we're just calling this animate method on each of these elements. And this accepts keyframes and options. But what's interesting is that under the hood, what this animate method does, it's calling this new animation constructor. We just had a session on constructors and everything from Dhananjay, and this is where things get pretty interesting. Because this animation constructor opens up a world of possibilities for us. By this, you get access to these methods. You can pause, play, reverse, finish, and cancel at any given instance of time. That's the amount to expect. Any given instance of time. You remember when we talked about state animations, right? Over there, you don't have any control. You just have 0%, 50%, 100%. But with this animations API, you can do it in any single point of time. And this is something from the web animations API spec itself, that time may be shifted backwards and forwards, scaled, reversed, paused, and repeated. I know, you might be like, hey, Ishan, it's just an API. What's the big deal? What's a big fuss about it? For that, I need to ask you this question. How many of you are Marvel fans over here? Marvel, MCU. I hope I don't have to explain the abbreviation. Thank God. Even I am a huge Marvel fan, and a few months ago I was watching this one web show, Moon Knight. A good series, by the way. If you are not a Marvel fan, please watch it. And this is when one of my designer friends, she reached out to me. She saw this one particular scene in the series, and she was like, dude, this is cool. Can we create something like this using web? And someone who has been working with the web for 8 years, I couldn't say no. I was like, yeah, of course, it should be easy. But I had no idea how to do it. So that is when Web Animations API came to the rescue. And this is something that I built. Yeah, so this guy is Khonshu, that was the character name. And if you click on it, the sky spins. And by the way, there's this one cool website. I saw this in 2021, and the moment I saw this blew up my mind. This is Apple's macOS Big Sur page. It doesn't exist anymore. I'm using the Wayback Machine to go through this. But the moment you scroll, you'll notice this one particular effect. All of the screens are coming in, and boom. So, the moment I saw this, I was fascinated with this, and I was like, dude, this is cool. How can I do something like this? How can I create animations like these, which are scroll synchronized? So let's try to do that. Let's try to answer this question. For that, let's try to, first of all, break this down into what is happening over here. First of all, you need a MacBook, or an image of a MacBook, even Windows works. And then, if you notice that this particular window, it's coming in from the top left corner. And then this one is coming in, fading in, and coming in from the bottom right. These are just images of these windows, transparent PNGs. And next up, this particular notifications panel is coming from the top right, and this one fades in from the bottom left. Now, if you notice one thing closely, that this is not one single animation. These are individual animations. But when you put all of them together, this is what those folks at Apple did. They put all of these together, and that's how it turned out. This gives you this immersive effect. This is known as a sequence of animations. Now we can do the same thing using the Web Animations API, what we just wrote right earlier on. But you can imagine that things might start looking messier in code, because now you have to do the state management and everything. Let's say that, hey, when this window is at 0.5%, then only animate this one, otherwise don't. So you need, what we need is a conductor, not the physics one which can conduct electrons, but someone who can play an orchestra, not Tom, maybe someone fancier. So that is where libraries like GSAP and Motion One can come into the picture. Now I have played a lot with GreenSock, but I haven't played around that much with Motion One. But one thing that both of them have in common is this timeline object. And this is where things, remember when I told you that the animation constructor was super cool? Because what happens, this timeline object can accept a sequence of animations, like an array of animations. But then animation constructor, it actually accepts two things. One is effect, which were the keyframe effects that we passed earlier. And second thing is timeline. And by default, all of your browsers, they already have this document or timeline which you can access in the console. It tells you about how much time you have spent on a particular page. So whatever CSS animations we write, or whatever animation, that CAD animation we wrote before, it actually hooks up into this particular document or timeline, and that's how they run. So GreenSock has this particular plugin called Scroll Trigger, which is used to create those scroll-based animations. What it does is, it replaces the timeline with a scroll trigger-based timeline, and that's how you see those immersive effects. Now, sometimes in your products, you may want to go for rather plug-and-play options, like, GIFs is the first choice that comes to someone's mind. But GIFs are not particularly good for basically two reasons. One is their huge file size, and secondly, they are low resolution and everything. The main thing is that these are raster-based, so you can't scale it up. Oh, by the way, this reminds me, we use GIFs for stickers, right? I have a few stickers over here. Who wants it? Do you want some stickers? Man, that's it, only one person. Okay. I'll try to throw it as far as I can, but let's see. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, so instead of using GIFs, what we can do is we can use something like Lottie files or Rive. Rive, if you're someone who has worked with Flutter, this was very famous back then, and they are introducing support for web as well. So these are vector-based, first of all, and secondly, they don't take up a lot of size. Lottie files in particular is like they animate SVGs to create these same animations, and Rive has this different engine, which renders it on the canvas itself. But the main advantage is that you can scale it up because these are vector-based and they have low size. Now, we just talked about what all happened. We started with back from 1987 with GIFs, and then SMIL, then Flash, then CSS animations and transitions. And we looked at Web Animations API as well, and then some other libraries like GSAP and Motion One. And although there's so much more to cover, but let's just take a moment to appreciate, how far we have come together and in this animations world and where we are headed next. So this is something which was introduced last year in Google I/O, and Chrome developers, they're working on this particular thing, page transitions API. So whenever you are navigating any two pages, like when you do that on phone, Flutter developers, Android developers, they already have access to this. So they can easily animate anything. However, we don't have that on the web, and that is something that they're working on. And once this gets introduced, adding page transitions to your apps would be as simple as adding this single line of code. And in case of React, it would be like with use location router and everything. And you can still do this, by the way, but for that you need frame of motion, and there's a lot of boilerplate involved. Now, of course, there are a lot more things which can be done using web animations, and something we didn't really talk about today is 3D animations, 3JS and WebGL and all of that, because we had short amount of time. But here is one of my favorite examples, which I just came across a few days ago. This is a particular website. We'll need audio again, I guess. So I'm not sure, I don't know which singer is this and everything. But this is a particular website I came across, and if you scroll down, it looks normal, nothing fancy. But then they have these album art covers and CDs. The coolest part is if you click on one of these, this audio plays. Can we play it? Okay. Yeah, so this was one of the coolest effects that I've seen so far, the coolest implementation of 3D animations or WebGL. If you have some other examples, please feel free to share those. We don't need the audio anymore, thank you. But yeah, another important thing that we didn't talk about today, and something that we should focus on, is accessibility when we are crafting anything for the web. And I know even when I started with animations, I just added them for the sake of making the websites look cool, and because I could. So whenever I saw those fancy glitch effects and everything, I just kept on adding them. But you should not forget that the end goal of building any website or adding these micro interactions or animation is to help your users, even those with physical disabilities, to easily access your information. And that is one thing you should keep in mind when you are adding all of them. And yeah, with that, we have reached the end. If you have any feedback for me, please feel free to meet me during lunch and share. You can also share your plate as well. And then you can connect with me over these handles. Now, usually I end my talks over here, but since I'm in Ahmedabad, I want to do one more thing, which is, since I submit my CFP around 3 or 4 weeks back, and then Hiren is the one who reached out to me, and the entire team. I'm from Jalandhar, by the way, in Punjab, so I come from North, and yeah, the entire team, they have been super appreciative of every single thing, and every single time, like every evening, I guess Hiren will ping me, "Hey Ishan, is everything good? Are we good? Like, did you book tickets and everything?" So I just wanted to give a huge round of applause for the entire team of GDG Ahmedabad and all of the volunteers, Like, it takes crazy amount of efforts to pull an event at this scale. So, tumharo abhar, GDG Ahmedabad team. That's it from my side. Thank you so much. You have been a great audience. and enjoy your lunch.
Thank you so much, Ishan, for your appreciation, and yeah, thank you so much for showing the history of animations from past, present, and what lies in the future. And I hope all the web developers who are here learned valuable lessons about animations. Now, to present the token of appreciation from our side, to Ishan. Thank you so much.